Harper Lane was bent over cleaning the M230 chain gun beneath the belly of the Apache AH-64E, sweat and oil staining her faded maintenance jumpsuit. A male mechanic glanced over, smirking. "When you're done here, make sure you wipe the dust off the rotors too." Rookie. Laughter erupted across the landing pad, but Harper stayed silent, her hands moving with the precision of a rhythm long memorized. As she turned, her loosely rolled sleeve slipped to reveal a worn patch, a distinctive emblem no one here had ever seen outside of archived photos. Pilot Mason Keller had just walked up and froze in place, his expression shifting to sudden seriousness, and no one heard him say another word. Her fingers slid along the cool metal of the chain gun, wiping away grime with a rag so worn it barely held together. Harper's face didn't flinch, even as the laughter echoed off the concrete walls of the maintenance bay. She had heard worse. The Afghanistan sun beat down outside, casting long shadows across the floor, and the air smelled of diesel and dust. A bead of sweat rolled down her cheek, but she didn't stop to wipe it. Her hands knew every curve of the weapon, every bolt, every seam. She wasn't just cleaning it, she was checking it, feeling for imperfections, like a doctor listening to a heartbeat. The guys didn't notice. They never did. To them, she was just the new girl, probably hired to fill a quota someone to haze until she quit. The memory hit her then unbidden as she tightened her grip on the rag. A different base years ago under a sky so clear it hurt to look at. She was younger then, barely 20, standing in a hangar much like this one, surrounded by men who didn't believe she belonged. One of them had tossed her a wrench, half expecting her to drop it. She caught it without looking, spun it in her hand, and went back to work. That day she'd fixed a hydraulic leak in half the time it took the others. They didn't laugh after that. Harper blinked and the memory dissolved. She was back in the present, her hands still moving the chain gun gleaming under her touch. Before she could finish, a shadow fell across her work. She glanced up, expecting another jab, but it was just a young soldier, barely 19, staring at her with a mix of curiosity and pity. He didn't say anything, just handed her a bottle of water, the cap already loosened. She nodded, took a sip, and set it down carefully on the toolbox beside her. The kid shuffled away, glancing back like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Harper didn't mind the silence. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to do a job, to disappear into the work, to be left alone. But alone was never an option, not in a place like this. Hey, if this story's hitting you, take a second to grab your phone. Hit that like button drop, a comment below, maybe share a story of your own. And if you want more like this, subscribe to the channel. It means a lot, keeps us going, keeps these stories alive. All right, let's get back to Harper. The maintenance bay was buzzing now, the afternoon shift in full swing. Tools clanged against metal radios, crackled with static, and the air was thick with the hum of engines being tested. Harper stood up, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit, and that's when the real trouble started. A group of technicians gathered near the Apache, their voices loud, their gestures exaggerated. The ringleader, a guy named Travis, mid-30s, stocky with a permanent sneer and a watch that cost more than most people's cars, pointed at her. "Hey, new girl, you missed a spot," he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. The others laughed, a sharp cutting sound that bounced off the walls. "What's with the outfit? You raid a thrift store before you got here." Another guy, Derek, joined in, his polo shirt tucked too tightly into his khakis, his hair gelled to a shine. "Seriously, Harper, you're making us look bad. At least put on a clean jumpsuit. You're embarrassing the whole crew." He leaned against the Apache, crossing his arms, his smirk daring her to respond. The others nodded, egging him on. A third guy, skinny with a nervous laugh, and a name tag that read, Kyle, chimed in. "Bet she doesn't even know what she's doing. Probably just here to look busy until they fire her." The laughter grew louder, drawing eyes from across the bay. Even the young soldier who'd given her water looked away, embarrassed for her. Harper didn't move. She stood there, rag in one hand, the other resting lightly on the chain gun. Her eyes flicked to Travis, then Derek, then Kyle. She didn't glare, didn't scowl, just looked. And that look, it wasn't anger. It was something else, something that made Kyle's laugh falter. "What?" she said, her voice low, steady, like she was asking for the time. The question hung in the air, simple but heavy. Nobody answered. Travis coughed, turned away. Derek muttered something under his breath. Kyle just stared at his boots. Harper went back to her work, the rag moving again, slow and deliberate, like nothing had happened. A few hours later, the bay quieted as the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. Harper was alone now, calibrating a sensor on the Apache's targeting system. A clatter broke her focus. Travis had knocked over a tray of tools, scattering wrenches across the floor. He didn't pick them up, just kicked one toward her. "Since you're so good at cleaning, how about you handle this mess too?" His buddies snickered, but there was an edge to it, like they were testing how far they could push. Harper crouched, picking up the wrenches one by one, her movements slow, deliberate. She set each tool back in its place, her hands steady, but her jaw tightened just enough to notice. When she stood, she held the last wrench out to Travis, her eyes locking onto his. "You dropped this," she said, her voice flat, but sharp enough to cut through the laughter. Travis took it, his smirk fading, and the bay went quiet again. Mason Keller, the pilot, was still there standing off to the side, his helmet tucked under his arm. He hadn't joined in. The laughter hadn't said a word since he'd frozen at the sight of her patch. Now he watched her with a different kind of intensity, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The patch on her sleeve faded, frayed with a stylized talon, clutching a lightning bolt, wasn't just some random decoration. It was the emblem of the 101st Airborne's Ghost Talon Unit, a group so elite most people thought it was a myth. Disbanded years ago after a mission nobody talked about. Mason's jaw tightened as he stared at it, his fingers twitching against his helmet. Harper noticed, but didn't look up. She just kept cleaning her hands steady, her face unreadable. The maintenance chief, a grizzled guy named Robbins with a voice like gravel, walked over, clipboard in hand. He glanced at the chain gun, then at Harper. "Lane, the torque specs for reinstalling the M230. His tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either, just testing her like he tested everyone. Before she could answer, Derek snorted. "She probably Googled it last night." The others chuckled, but Harper didn't miss a beat. 75 foot-pounds, cross-tightening in a star pattern. Final check at 90. She said, her voice calm, like she was reading off a menu. Robbins raised an eyebrow, nodded, and walked away. Derek's smirk faded, but he recovered quickly. "Memorizing's one thing." He muttered, "This not the date. Doing, it's another." Harper didn't respond. She grabbed a torque wrench from the toolbox and started reassembling the chain gun. Her movements were fluid, practiced like she could do this blindfolded. The team gathered around, half curious, half skeptical, one of them, holding a stopwatch. Travis leaned in, whispering to Kyle, "No way she finishes under standard." Standard time for the M230 was 12 minutes. Harper's hands moved faster, never fumbling, never hesitating. She tightened each bolt with precision, checked each connection, and ran a final safety check with a technique so specific it made Mason's eyes narrow. 10 minutes, 50 seconds. She stepped back, wiped her hands, and set the wrench down. The stopwatch clicked off. Silence. Mason broke it. "Who taught you that check?" His voice was quiet, but it carried across the bay. Harper looked at him for the first time, her eyes steady, unblinking. "An old friend," she said, and turned back to her toolbox. Mason didn't push it, but his gaze lingered. That safety check wasn't standard. It was something only a handful of people knew, something taught in a program, so classified it didn't officially exist. He remembered hearing about it years ago from a pilot who'd flown with Ghost Talon, a unit that didn't just maintain Apaches. They flew them, fought in them, lived and died by them. Harper didn't look like a legend, but legends didn't always look the part. As the crew dispersed, a new face appeared, a logistics officer named Carla, mid-40s, with a clipboard clutched like a shield, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She strutted over her heels, clicking on the concrete, and stopped in front of Harper. "You're Lane, right? The one they're all talking about." Her tone was syrupy, fake nice, the kind that hit a barb. "I heard you're good with tools, but this isn't a garage back home. You sure you're cut out for a place like this?" She tilted her head, waiting for Harper to shrink. Harper didn't. She zipped her toolbox shut, the sound sharp in the quiet bay, and looked at Carla. "I'm here," she said, her voice even, like stating a fact. Carla's smile faltered and she walked away, muttering about attitude under her breath. By late afternoon, the bay was quieter, the team scattered to other tasks. Harper was checking the Apache's hydraulic lines when a group of younger soldiers fresh from training wandered in. They were loud, cocky, their uniforms crisp, their boots still shiny. One of them, a kid named Jake with a buzz cut and a grin too wide for his face, spotted her. "Yo, mechanic girl, you ever actually fire one of these?" He gestured at the chain gun, his buddies snickering behind him. "If you can clean it, maybe you can shoot it." Another kid shorter with a tattoo peeking out from his sleeve joined in. Bet she'd faint if she heard it go off. The others laughed, egging each other on. Harper didn't look up. She just kept working her hands steady on the hydraulic valve. Mason, who'd been checking his flight logs nearby, glanced over. "This is a real weapon?" he said, his tone half joking, half warning. "Not a game?" Jake shrugged, still grinning. "She knows that, right, Harper? Or you scared?" The others laughed again, louder this time. Harper paused, her fingers still on the valve. She looked at Jake, her expression calm, almost curious. "I know," she said, her voice soft but sharp like a blade hidden in velvet. She turned and walked toward the cockpit, her steps slow, deliberate. The laughter died down. Jake's grin faltered. Nobody expected her to actually climb in. Before she reached the cockpit, a maintenance logbook slipped from her toolbox, hitting the floor with a soft thud. Jake scooped it up, flipping it open with a smirk, expecting to find nothing but blank pages or doodles. Instead, his eyes caught a handwritten note tucked inside, the ink faded but legible Raptor claw. 2017. Lane, don't forget the sequence. His smirk vanished. He passed the book to his buddy, who read it and went quiet. Harper noticed, walked back, and held out her hand. Jake handed it over his eyes, avoiding hers. She tucked the book away without a word, but the air felt heavier now, like the room was holding its breath. Mason, watching from the side, tilted his head, his fingers tightening on his flight log. Mason flipped a switch on the Apache's control panel, setting it to training mode. "Go ahead," he said, his voice neutral, but there was something in his eyes, curiosity maybe, or something deeper. Harper climbed into the gunner's seat, her movement smooth like she'd done it 1,000 times. She gripped the controls, her fingers finding the triggers without hesitation. The simulation screen lit up, targets appearing in quick succession. 5 short bursts, each one precise, each one dead center. The screen flashed 100% accuracy. Jake's jaw dropped. Kyle, standing nearby, stammered, "No way." Mason just watched, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. As Harper climbed out, a radio crackled in the corner of the bay, a voice cutting through the stunned silence. Keller Lane, briefing room now. The team parted as Harper walked past, her boots steady on the concrete. In the briefing room, a projector displayed grainy footage of an Apache under fire dated 2017. The commander paused it, pointing at a figure in the gunner's seat. "That's you, Lane, isn't it?" he asked, his voice low, not accusing, but searching. Harper glanced at the screen, her hands still at her sides. Was she said one word? No explanation? The room went quiet, the weight of her answer sinking in. Travis, lingering by the door, shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado gone. Word spread fast. By evening, the base was buzzing with rumors. Harper was called into the security office, a small room with a metal desk and a flickering fluorescent light. The officer, a stern woman named Captain Ruiz, held up a photo of Harper's patch. "Care to explain this?" she asked, her voice clipped. Harper sat across from her, hands folded in her lap, her jumpsuit still stained with oil. "It's mine," she said simply. Ruiz frowned. "This is a Ghost Talon patch. That unit's been gone for years. You're telling me you were part of it?" Harper didn't answer, just met Ruiz's gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. Outside, soldiers whispered. "Probably bought it online to look cool," and said, "Bet she's faking it," another muttered. Harper didn't defend herself. She didn't need to. Back in the bay, a new shift had started and the mood was tense. A senior technician, a woman named Marla with sharp eyes and a clipboard full of checklists, approached Harper. "Heard you're some kind of hotshot," she said, her tone skeptical, her arms crossed. "Let's see, you recalibrate the Apache's targeting system. Bet you can't do it without a manual." The others watched, waiting for Harper to fumble. She didn't. She adjusted the system with a precision that made Marla's pen pause mid-check. When Harper finished, she handed Marla the calibration tool, her eyes steady. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice quiet but firm. Marla didn't answer, just walked away, her clipboard clutched a little tighter. Mason, meanwhile, was in his quarters, his laptop open to the base's internal database. He typed her name, Harper Lane, and waited. A classified file popped up, locked behind layers of security. He used his clearance, his fingers hesitating before hitting enter. The screen filled with text. Harper Lane, discharged at 25. Sole survivor of Operation Raptor Claw. Top-tier maintenance and gunnery skills. Saved an Apache squadron from an ambush in 17. Mason leaned back, his breath catching. He remembered that mission, heard about it in hushed tones from pilots who'd been there. A mechanic who wasn't just a mechanic, a gunner who'd taken the controls when everyone else was down. He closed the laptop, grabbed his helmet, and headed to the maintenance bay. Harper was there alone checking the Apache's wiring. Mason set his helmet on the toolbox, the thud echoing in the quiet bay. "Thank you," he said, his voice low for that day. Harper paused her hand on a wire, but didn't look up. This time she said, "I just came for a quiet job." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight to it, a tiredness that wasn't just from the day's work. Mason nodded like he understood and walked away. Harper went back to her work, her hands moving again, but her fingers lingered on the wire a second longer than they needed to, as if grounding herself in the familiar. The next morning, a supply truck rolled in, kicking up dust as it parked near the bay. The driver, a loud guy named Vince, with a habit of talking over everyone, spotted Harper organizing tools. "Hey, you're the one they are all whispering about," he said, leaning against the truck, his grin smug. "What's a girl like you doing in a place like this? Shouldn't you be, I don't know, filing papers or something?" He laughed, expecting the others to join in. Harper didn't stop sorting tools, but her hands slowed her fingers, brushing over a socket wrench. She picked it up, tested its weight, and set it down with a soft clink. "I'm where I need to be," she said, her voice low, final. Vince's grin faded and he climbed back into his truck without another word. That night, everything changed. An Apache was prepped for an emergency mission, ground troops pinned down, taking heavy fire. The chain gun jammed. During pre-flight checks, the mechanism locked tight. The technicians scrambled tools, clattering voices rising in panic. "We've got 10 minutes before that bird needs to be in the air," Robin shouted. Travis tried to fix it, cursing under his breath, but the jam wouldn't budge. Derek stood back, shaking his head. "We're screwed," he muttered. "Solzadar." The commander, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, looked at Harper. "Lane, you're up. Without you, we're done." Travis scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If she fixes it in time, I'll walk on my head." Harper didn't acknowledge him. She stepped forward, toolbox in hand, and got to work. Her hands moved with a speed that seemed impossible, dismantling the chain gun's feed mechanism, clearing the jam and reassembling it in a blur. 3 minutes, she ran a full safety check, her fingers flying through the motions, and stepped back. "It's good," she said, her voice calm like she'd just tied her shoe. The commander nodded, but Mason standing nearby spoke up. "Get in," he said. Harper looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, but she didn't argue. She grabbed a helmet, climbed into the gunner's seat, and strapped in. The fit was perfect, like the seat had been made for her. As the Apache's engines roared to life, a young radio operator barely out of training fumbled with his headset nearby. He'd overheard the chaos and seen Harper step up. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cracking, I heard what you did back then. My brother was in that squadron. He made it home because of you." His hands shook as he adjusted his headset, his eyes bright with gratitude. Harper paused, her helmet half on, and gave him a small nod, her lips pressing together like she was holding something back. She climbed into the cockpit, the door shutting behind her, and the radio operator watched her go, his hands still trembling. The Apache lifted off, the roar of the rotors, drowning out the whispers below. Harper's hands were steady on the controls, her eyes locked on the targeting screen. The mission was chaos, enemy fire lighting up the night, ground troops calling for support. She fired in short, controlled bursts, each one hitting its mark. Targets dropped one after another until the radio crackled with a relieved voice. "We're clear. Thanks, Ghost." Mason glanced at her, a small nod of respect, but Harper didn't look back. She just kept her hands on the controls, her face calm, focused, like she'd never left the seat. When they landed, the maintenance bay was silent. The team stood there, tools forgotten in their hands, staring as Harper climbed out of the cockpit. Travis's face was pale, his mouth half open. Derek looked at the ground, his hands shoved in his pockets. Kyle just stared like he was seeing her for the first time. The commander walked over, his voice quiet but firm. "Good work, Lane." She nodded, set the helmet down, and walked away, her steps slow but steady. Nobody laughed. Nobody said a word. The air felt different now, heavier, like the truth had settled over them all. The following afternoon, a group of pilots gathered near the Apache, their voices low but animated. One of them, a cocky guy named Ethan, with a habit of name-dropping his connections, spotted Harper checking a fuel line. "Hey, Lane," he called out, his tone teasing but sharp. "You're getting a lot of attention for a mechanic. What's next? You gonna fly the thing solo?" His buddies chuckled, but their laughter stopped when Harper straightened up, wiping her hands on a rag. She looked at Ethan, her gaze steady, and said, "If I need to." The simplicity of it, the quiet confidence, made Ethan's grin freeze. He turned away, muttering about overrated skills, but the other pilots exchanged glances. their conversation quieter now. The next day, the base was quieter. Travis didn't show up for his shift. Word was he'd been reassigned to a desk job stateside, his attitude finally catching up with him. Derek's name popped up on a blog post that night, a leaked video of him mocking Harper circling online, his reputation shredded by morning. Kyle lost his spot on a high-profile training program, his sponsors pulling out, after hearing he'd been part of the hazing. Nobody said Harper had anything to do with it. She didn't need to. The truth had a way of balancing things out, like gravity pulling a stone to the ground. Harper kept working same as always. She cleaned tools, checked systems, moved through the bay with that same quiet focus. But people looked at her differently now. The young soldier who'd given her water smiled when he passed her, a little shy, a little awestruck. Robbins nodded to her. No questions, no tests. And Mason, when he walked by, he didn't say much, just tipped his head like they shared a secret nobody else could touch. Harper didn't smile back, but her eyes softened just for a moment before she turned back to her work. Later that week, a maintenance audit team arrived, their clipboards and stern faces signaling trouble. One of them, a wiry man named Peterson with a habit of barking orders, singled out Harper. "Lane, your logs are incomplete," he snapped, holding up a form she'd signed. "You think you can just breeze through here without paperwork?" The bay went quiet, and everyone watching. Harper took the form, scanned it, and pointed to a section he'd overlooked. "It's all there," she said, her voice calm but firm, handing it back. Peterson's face reddened as he read it, realizing his mistake. He stormed off, muttering about double-checking, but the crew saw it. Harper hadn't just held her ground, she'd made him look small. Days later, a black SUV rolled into the base. Its windows tinted, its engine humming low. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, his face, calm but commanding like he owned the ground. He walked on. He didn't introduce himself, didn't need to. The air shifted when he entered the maintenance bay, conversation stopping, heads turning. He walked straight to Harper, who was checking a rotor blade. She looked up, her hands stilling. He didn't say much, just ready to go. She nodded, grabbed her toolbox, and slung her bag over her shoulder. The room watched as they walked out together, her steps matching his, her head high. Nobody mocked her now, nobody whispered. The ones who'd laughed were gone or silent, their faces turned away. Harper didn't look back. She didn't need to. Her silence, her work, her presence, it had said enough. The SUV pulled away, dust trailing behind it, and the base felt smaller without her. She'd come for a quiet job, but she'd left as something else. Not a hero, not a victim. Just Harper Lane, who'd been through fire and walked out whole. You've been there, haven't you? Judged for how you look, what you wear, where you stand. You've felt that sting carried, that weight kept your head down when the world tried to break you. You weren't wrong to stay quiet. You weren't alone in holding your ground. And you're still here, stronger for it. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment below and hit follow to walk with me through heartbreak, betrayal, and finally healing.